Stop whatever you are doing right now. Pull up a chair. The Indiana Fever just drafted a player who called Clark's fanbase racist. And the coach's response at the press conference made everything worse. Clark fans are now boycotting ticket sales. The secondary market is freezing. And the front office is sending desperate marketing emails trying to fill seats they could not give away 2 years ago. But here is what nobody is telling you about this story, and it changes everything. Here is the exact quote from Stephanie White at the draft press conference on the 14th of April. "Well, we're not speaking those into existence anymore, but I think it helps because Ty is a player who is a combo that can play on and off the ball. Caitlin is a player who can play on and off the ball. Raven is a point guard that primarily has had the ball in her hands. So I think it gives us some versatility. Thankfully, having a couple of different guards gives us the ability to allow Kelsey to rest a little bit too." Read that again. Raven Johnson, a rookie, is described as the point guard who primarily has the ball in her hands. Caitlin Clark, the greatest offensive playmaker in women's basketball history, is described as someone who can play on and off the ball. And Clark fans lost their minds, and honestly, you can understand why. But here is what I need you to stay for. Because later in this video, I am going to show you something in that press conference. Quote that every fan and every channel covering this story completely missed. Something that actually tells a different story about what Stephanie White is planning. And it might be the thing that saves this entire situation before training camp opens. To understand why Clark fans reacted the way they did, you need the full backstory on Raven Johnson. Because this is not just about a draft pick. This goes back 3 years. In the 2023 NCAA Final Four, Clark and Iowa beat Johnson and South Carolina 77-73. During the game, Clark covered Johnson, but was often seen standing nowhere near her. Clark and the Hawkeyes did not think Johnson would be a problem from outside, and kept leaving her wide open from beyond the arc. That single viral moment birthed a massive controversy. Johnson went viral for being waved off by Clark at the three-point line. Johnson told the I Am Athlete podcast how that moment came full circle. She bounced back by helping lead South Carolina to an undefeated season the next year. The Gamecocks went 38-0 and finished by getting revenge on Clark and the Hawkeyes with an 87-75 victory in the national title game. That was Clark's final college game. So the history between these two is real. It is documented, and it was already generating strong fan reactions before the draft even happened. Then came the podcast comments. Just weeks before the draft, Johnson went on a highly publicized podcast and labeled Clark's supporters as toxic, as bullies, and accused them of racism. Whether you agree with her assessment or not is a separate conversation. From a pure public relations standpoint, drafting a player who just publicly alienated your primary fan base is a decision that required a flawless press conference response. What the Fever got instead was the opposite of flawless. The fan backlash was immediate, and it was loud. The Fever took to social media to announce Johnson as their 10th pick. While some fans expressed delight, more than a few others were very disappointed. The Fever are now facing intense backlash from a good number of disgruntled fans. "Are you kidding me?" One comment on Instagram read. Fans took to social media with reactions, including, "Good rotation, you mean cut Clark minutes, so you can help her loose MVP SW. Prioritizing a 30-year-old guard over your generational franchise player LMAU free you Caitlin. Steph White really hates Caitlin Clark. White would love to get rid of CC. I think she would rather have a defensive-minded PG like Raven. She just doesn't get it. She low-key sabotaging CC every chance she gets." And the backlash went beyond social media comments. Season ticket renewals stalled. Fans on the wait list refused to purchase when called by ticket representatives. The secondary ticket market, which was once a booming economy of overpriced Fever tickets, began to freeze. This is the part of the story that matters for the business. Because the Fever went from a franchise with a season ticket waiting list to a franchise sending desperate marketing emails in a matter of 48 hours. That is not a small shift. That is a warning shot from the most loyal and financially invested part of their fan base. Now here is the part I told you to stay for. Every own is quoting one specific section of Stephanie White's press conference. The part about Clark playing on and off the ball. The part that set the internet on fire, but nobody is quoting the sentence that came directly after it. White said, "I think we'll have a pretty good rotation when it comes to our perimeter players, especially in the 1-2 spot. We can give different looks, so it is going to be really important. We can go with a defensive lineup. When you have somebody like Raven and Ty played for us in Connecticut, she understands what we're about on the defensive end of the floor." Read that carefully. She is not describing Clark playing off the ball in the primary offensive lineup. She is describing a specific defensive lineup configuration, a lineup that would be used in specific game situations to lock down opposing guards. Every championship team has a defensive lineup they deploy in closing situations. The Golden State Warriors used a lineup with Draymond Green running point in defensive possessions. The Las Vegas Aces used a lineup with Chelsea Gray and Jackie Young closing out defensive possessions. What White appears to be describing is a situational defensive unit, not a permanent reassignment of Clark's role. The problem is she communicated that in the worst possible way at the worst possible moment. Johnson averaged 9.9 points, 5.5 assists, and 4 rebounds per game in her final college season. She was the reigning SEC Defensive Player of the Year. She shot 39.8% from 3, and her usage rate of 17.4% suggests she played significant time off the ball, which means she already knows how to play alongside a primary ball handler. That is not a player being drafted to replace Clark at point guard. That is a player being drafted to give Clark rest when needed, and to provide a defensive option that the Fever have not had before. Here is the basketball argument that the outrage cycle is completely drowning out. Clark missed 31 games last season. Mitchell missed significant time too, due to rhabdomyolysis. Indiana needed more depth in the backcourt after injuries impacted the 2025 season for both Clark and Mitchell. Before the Johnson pick, the Fever's backcourt depth behind Clark and Mitchell was a single player, Tyasha Harris. One injury to either starter, and Indiana was effectively a WNBA team running a one-guard rotation. That is not a championship roster construction. That is a disaster waiting to happen. Johnson gives Indiana a third legitimate ball handler, a defensive specialist who can guard the opposing team's best perimeter player, a player who, if Clark needs 10 minutes of rest in the fourth quarter of a playoff game, can hold the fort without the offense collapsing entirely. Johnson is looking forward to being teammates with Clark. After being picked by the Fever, she said she cannot wait to learn from Clark and her other new teammates. She described herself as someone who will be a sponge. That is not the language of a player coming in to take Clark's job. That is a rookie who understands her role and is genuinely excited about the opportunity. The beef between Clark and Johnson during their college days was real. But professional basketball players are adults who have played against dozens of players they once competed with. That history does not determine chemistry. Minutes and wins determine chemistry. Here is the honest assessment of where this stands. The draft pick itself is defensible. The press conference was not. Stephanie White needed to say one thing clearly, and she did not say it. She needed to say, "Caitlin Clark is our starting point guard, and the entire offense runs through her." 6 words. That is it. No rotation talk. No on and off the ball language. Just a clear, unambiguous statement that the franchise player is the franchise player. Because right now the silence on that specific question is doing enormous damage. Not because the fans are wrong to care. They are absolutely right to care. But because a simple clarifying statement would end 90% of this controversy immediately. If White calls a press conference before training camp opens and says those 6 words, "Caitlin Clark is our point guard," the ticket boycott ends within 48 hours. The secondary market unfreezes. The social media storm settles. If she does not say it, this story keeps building through training camp into preseason and will be the dominant narrative going into the May 9 season opener against the Dallas Wings. That is a distraction this team absolutely does not need in a season where a healthy Clark has declared championship expectations. Now let me zoom out and give you the full business context, because this is important. The WNBA just signed an 11-year media rights deal worth over $2.2 billion. The new CBA dramatically increased salaries. The league is entering its most commercially significant season in 30 years. The broadcasting networks paid that premium because they are banking on viewers tuning in to watch Caitlin Clark. They did not pay $2 billion to watch Clark stand in the corner. while a defensive specialist runs a half-court set. If the Fever's ratings drop because of a coaching controversy that was entirely avoidable with 6 words at a press conference, everybody loses. The Fever lose ticket revenue. The WNBA loses viewer numbers. The networks lose advertising dollars, and Clark loses the platform she has spent 2 years building. The good news is that none of that has to happen. The season has not started yet. Training camp has not opened yet. There is still time for a clear public statement that resets the narrative before the first game tips off. Clark declared on NBC, "So there is nothing like playing for the Fever. I think we're going to be the favorite to win it all." Adds a little pressure, but that is what you love about it. "We got a great squad, a great coach, great support staff, so it is super exciting." She said that 3 weeks ago she believes in this team. She believes in this coaching staff. The question is whether this coaching staff will get out of their own way long enough to let her prove it. So here is where I land on this. The Raven Johnson pick is defensible on basketball merit. She is a defensive specialist who gives a historically injury-prone backcourt legitimate depth. The history between her and Clark is real, but professional athletes compete against former rivals every single season. The press conference was a communications disaster that was entirely avoidable. 1 sentence, 6 words. That is all it would have taken to prevent a week of boycott threats and ticket market freeze. The Fever have until May 9 to fix this. And based on everything we know about Clark, the FIBA MVP, the NBC analyst, the player who said the Fever will win it all, she is not going anywhere and she is not giving up on this season. So here is your question for today. 2 parts, drop both answers in the comments. Part 1, was the Raven Johnson pick smart or dumb? Just those 2 words, smart or dumb. Part 2, does Stephanie White need to make a public statement clarifying Clark's role before training camp? Yes or no? I want the debate in the comments. I read every single one. If this is your first time on Courtside Verdict, real stories, verified sources, no fabricated drama, subscribe and hit the bell. Training camp opens this week and every development gets covered here first.